And so as Moses begins to see the victories that are racking up against Sihon and against Og of Bashan, I think he's beginning to really see and sense that things are going to start moving and shaking here, that the Israelites are about to go in and conquer that land and take things over and begin to experience that kingdom living, so to speak. And I think he really begins to plead. He begins to plead with God, saying, oh, let me go into the promised land. I can see your strength and your glory beginning to manifest itself. You're beginning to fulfill those promises. And he's really excited, and he's begging God. It literally says, this is the word that is our Torah portion, Vaetchanan, and I pleaded with Yehovah, saying, oh, Lord God, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven and earth who can do such mighty works as yours? And let me, I pray, cross over and see that fair land that is beyond the Jordan, that good hill country in Lebanon. But here's the key phrase that I think is very interesting. It says, Yehovah was angry with me on your account and would not listen to me. And he basically said, enough. Don't ask me again about this. Apparently Moses had been bugging him pretty rapidly about getting into the promised land. And he says, stop bothering me, essentially. You're not going in. Now, what's fascinating to me is that he says, on your account. Now, I know that you guys remember this. Do you remember that Moses was rejected from going to the promised land because of something the people did?
No, he struck the rock a second time when he should have spoken to it. He blew the prophetic type of Christ. Because, it's okay that we killed him the first time, but the second time we got to pray to him and ask him to be our king. And Moses blew it.
Yeah.
It's as though he struck Jesus again and again and never repented. And if you never repent, then you stay outside the promised land. So that's what it turned into for him.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jimbo. We saw that, one of the most probable things that happened there is that Moshe seemed to have destroyed the prophetic shadow picture. He did not explicitly follow the words of Yehovah. He acted contrary to what Yehovah had told him to do. And so, yes, Tammy, my presentation should be on the screen. You should be seeing my presentation. If you're not, you might need to fiddle around a bit. But yeah, he basically, he made some mistakes there at that incident. But what's fascinating to me is that he is saying, Yehovah was angry with me on your account. Now, that has definitely puzzled a lot of people, and they've thought to themselves, how is it that the people, why would it say that? And it actually says it twice. In the next chapter, it repeats the exact same phrase. Now,
in the next chapter, though, it also says because of your words, right?
It might. I think it does, yes. Now, do you have any insight regarding that, Mike?
Not really. I just noticed the parallel between the two chapters. Other than, his striking the rock and his anger towards them was because of their complaining.
Yeah.
It was their words.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it certainly could be interpreted in that way. Go ahead, Tracy.
Also, back in chapter 1, verse 37 is when Moses says, also Yahweh was angry with me for your sake, saying you shall not go in there. And, I was just going to say, it was because of their rebellion and their stubbornness that he lost his patience.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he would have done that had it not been for their obstinance.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think if you say, well, you know what, it was their complaining was the precipitating event. He certainly made some errors, but they were the precipitating event, of complaining and putting him in the situation where he had to do that. But I would also say there's a couple of things. If you just back up and look at the forest for a moment, you ask yourself some general questions. The people did experience very much grace and forgiveness from God. Now, there were flat-out rebels who engaged in some hardcore idolatry and sexual immorality, and they got killed. They did not experience that grace, although that might have been gracious. But the issue here, to the rest of the people, absolutely. I think that is a key consideration to think of, period, which is often evil people can be allowed to fester for a little while, but I think eventually, especially if they're in the midst of his own people, he can often take their lives in order to protect his own people from them. But I think what's interesting is that the people of Israel experienced so much mercy and grace and forgiveness. And what's fascinating to me is that Moses did not. Moses is, we look at this and we say, man, why did Moses have such a problem here? We look at it and say, he made a mistake. Now, we want to say, well, he messed up the prophetic shadow picture. Well, that's certainly true, and that is a big thing. However, from our perspective, we look at it and say, man, the people experienced so much more grace and forgiveness than Moses himself did. It's kind of easy to see that. Why was Moses being treated in a harsher, so to speak, fashion than your everyday Israelite? And some people would say, well, that's because leadership comes with stronger responsibilities and they're held to a higher standard. And I definitely get that. I think there is certainly an element of that if the leadership experiences these problems, then they can have a serious impact on the people around them. However, we see Aaron made some pretty...
He got away with everything.
Yeah, Aaron got away with everything. We've discussed that in the past a couple of times.
But he didn't go in.
He didn't go into the promised land either. That is correct. But he doesn't seem to have, had... It just seemed, if anyone seems worthy in our eyes, looking at these stories, of going into the promised land, it certainly seems like it would be Moses.
In our eyes, yeah.
In our eyes. Now, we're not seeing things the way that God is. But I want to bring something to your attention. I'm just going to read this sentence that I wrote here in my notes, and I think you'll pick up right away what I'm putting down. Moses interceded. He was a great intercessor for the people. He was willing on multiple occasions to lay down his life for the people of Israel. He interceded for them so much. And is it possible that he takes on some of their punishment? It almost seems like there might be just a miniature shadow picture of the Messiah Yeshua in the life of Moses. There are many, many prophetic shadow pictures in the life of Moses and Yeshua, between life of Moses and the life of Yeshua, and yet I think that this is one of the more prominent ones, perhaps.
So, when you say on your account, it could mean two different things. It could mean God was angry with me and it was your fault, or it can mean God was angry with me instead of directing his anger towards you on your account. That's
kind of one of the ideas. I don't know if you could hear what Angela said, but she was saying, it's possible that on your account was not because of you, but on your behalf. That God would not allow me to, and I think we've seen that Moses was willing to, lose his life on several occasions.
Blot my name out.
Blot my name out from your book. Kill me. So I think it's certainly possible that we have another prophetic shadow picture here of Moses taking the full weight of the punishment that might have been due more to the Israelites and died outside the promised land because of it. It's possible.
Ellen, I've read a little bit of some Orthodox Jewish writing, and I think if Moses had to have made at least one glaring mistake in that 40 years, where he kind of freaked out, I think some of the Jews would worship him almost as a deity.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That wouldn't be surprising at all. So just something to think about. I'm going to go to my next slide, and this shows where we're starting in chapter 4. And you can see that I have just mangled this text.
That's a lot of red.
It's a lot of red, but I wanted to bring your attention to these things, okay? So this is one of the first of the Shemas. Now, I know that you guys know that the traditional Shema text comes from chapter 6, verse 4, but here it says, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments." That word, listen, is Shema.
Same word.
It's the same word. And this is what, and you can, if you've read through this portion a few times, you can see that there is actually a series of Shemas, if you want to put it that way, with the main one being in chapter 6, verse 4. But here I want to bring to your attention, I'm going to read through not this whole section, but just the red text to just kind of focus your attention. Listen to the statutes and the judgments, so that you may live and take possession that the Father is giving you. You shall not add to the word which I am commanding you, nor take away from it. Many of you died in Baal Peor, who had attached themselves to Baal Peor, but those who held fast to Jehovah your God are alive today, every one of you. And I think John Coop was asking about that a moment ago, and I that may have answered his question right there. During the incident of Baal Peor, those who held fast to Jehovah your God are alive today, every one of you. So keep and do the commandments of God, because that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples. What great nation is there that has statutes and judgments as righteous as this? But give heed to yourself and keep your soul, guard your soul diligently, so that you do not forget. So I've just pulled out some key phrases here, and I want to bring your attention to a couple of them. So first of all, Shema. I'm going to deal with that word here, and I won't deal with it fully again when we look at the Shema in chapter 6, verse 4. But remember that Shema is best translated. It does not mean listen. That's certainly a part of it, but it does not mean listen. Now, some good translations will use the word hearken instead of the Hebrew word Shema. And hearken is a great translation, but it is such an archaic English word that most people don't really even know what that means anymore. So hearken means hear and do, to hear and obey.
Well, think about it with your kids. When you say, listen to me, they heard your words. Mm-hmm. The reason why you're telling them to listen is because they didn't do your words. So yeah. Even we have those linked together.
We absolutely do. So I just wanted to give you a brief heads up on that. To continuously be paying attention to Shema, hear and obey. Yes. So that you may live. Now there has been a discussion, and there was a discussion by Paul in a couple of different places regarding the Torah bringing death. But I think you can see pretty clearly that when he says here, obey these commandments so that you may live. Listen and obey the statutes and judgments, what I am teaching you to perform, so that you may live. And I have spoken with you guys on a couple of different occasions about this, because I think that the text of the Bible is so clear that the hearing and the obeying of God, it just brings life, period. Now, don't misunderstand me to say that you can be saved by observing the Torah, because that's just not true. I think you have to remember the prophetic shadow picture which is being displayed here for us is that the salvation occurred when God took them out of Egypt. All they had to do was have faith that God would do it. All they had to do was have a barbecue and put some of the blood of that lamb on that door to protect their lives. So even their little act of faith did require a little bit of action. It was very, very minimal action. Just put a little blood on your door. So there's that. But then comes, I have given you life. I have saved your life. I have rescued you from slavery. Now, in order to maintain your life, to stay alive, you need to obey me. Because the Torah can maintain life or it can bring death. It is a two-edged sword. Yes?
I have something to say.
Tell me.
You think about death as separation. It's the separation of the spirit from the body, and then you're separated from the living. And so if you think about death as a separation, if you obey the Torah, you draw closer to God, or are able to, and that is life. But when you when you don't obey the way he told you, then this is how you line up with me. If you choose not to align yourself with what he said is the way to do that, then you are separating yourself, and that is death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Did someone want to comment on that? I thought I heard some crackling. Crackling, not cackling.
Just stuff in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Not a problem. So, yes, failure to understand this basic premise of the Torah, which is carried out explicitly on multiple occasions by just about every author of the New Testament, has created some massive confusion for many believers who have these misunderstandings regarding what Paul is teaching us. Paul himself says that the Torah is life-giving and is spiritual and is good and is righteous, but it also says that the law brings death, because the law does bring death. If you violate the Torah, it can kill you. It can absolutely kill you. There's no question.
We're already dying, though.
We're already dying, as you know. We're born dying, but you can hasten the process.
Yeah. By
becoming disobedient and falling by the wayside and bringing curses upon yourself. I absolutely believe that. And you can also, on the flip side of that coin, obedience can bring healing to the body. I would draw your attention to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 22, and Proverbs 3, 1 through 8. Those are two very good little sections that talk about the obedience to the word bringing healing to your body. Now, I absolutely believe that that is true. Now, does that mean that bad things won't happen to you if you observe the Torah? No, absolutely not. I don't ever hear me say that, because I would be totally a liar. Because challenging things happen to everyone. And I think we're going to talk about that in just a moment.
Oh.
Go ahead, Angela.
You said bad things, but whose perspective?
From whose perspective? That's a great observation.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
That's a great observation. So
They look bad to you.
They do, yes, and I think that's
But you don't have all of them.
We don't have all the facts, and
No.
we don't have a perfect idea of what this all means and how it's coming together
Remember
for us.
Dover Castle?
I do, absolutely, yes. So I say the failure to understand this has caused so much confusion for believers, and that we need to remember that obedience can not only bring tremendous spiritual blessings, but you can see from many sections in the Torah, and even in the New Testament, that obedience to God and to His Word brings tremendous blessings. It certainly does. Now, I just want to bring something to your attention here in regarding what it says just before verse 2, it says, is giving you. The land that God is giving to your fathers. Now, just note to yourself that in biblical Hebrew, this is not the case in modern Hebrew,
I agree with you're going to say.
Biblical Hebrew does not have time-related verb tenses. It is perfect or imperfect.
Right.
It
It's
does
done
not-
or it's not done.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
So it does not have a is. It doesn't have an is, a was, and a will be. That's not how biblical Hebrew works. Now, in modern Hebrew, they did incorporate verb tenses into the language. So when it says that God is giving you, our English translators translate that into our verb tenses so that we can understand it a little bit better. But I think you need to remember, and this can be relevant and pertinent in so many different ways, because biblical Hebrew does not have God did do this, God is doing this, or God will do that. That's important for so many areas, especially prophecy.
Yeah.
Especially prophecy. If you're one of these people who studies prophecy a lot and you want to have a clearer understanding, what this tells us is that God is in the process
It's not complete.
of giving those people that land, giving his people inheritance into the promised land. He started that process when he promised that land to Abraham 550 years before that. And so during the time of Joshua, he's beginning to take them into the land. During the time of the judges, he's taking them into the land and sometimes they get conquered by their enemies. During the time of the kings, he expels them from the land and then brings some of them back.
Well, it's still not complete.
That's what I was just about to say,
Okay.
is that we
Right.
are still in the process of entering that land. Excuse me?
I said it's taken a long time.
It is taking a long time. Yes, it is taking a long time. But just remember that you and I, all of us, are still in the process of taking over that promised land. Being given the promised land. He's delivering the promised land into our grasp to this day. It's in process. It is not completed. When Yahweh says to Moshe at the burning bush, I am, that is a perfect tense, meaning I am complete. Mm-hmm. I don't have, it's not, we have sometimes interpreted that to say, I am, I was, I will be. That's fine. But what it literally says is,
doesn't it?
not quite.
Okay, what does it say then? Because
Look
I
it
was
up.
going to ask. Oh, okay.
Look it up. So just a note there, especially for people who are studying Hebrew prophecy, to just keep that in mind. So I just also wanted to say he is in the process of bringing us into his kingdom still, that promised land.
Yeah.
Okay. So adding or taking away. This is in verse 2, chapter 4, verse 2. So critical. And we see, unfortunately, this happen quite a bit. And I wanted to say, unfortunately, we have some misconceptions a lot of times. It is a common idea, and it's true as far as it goes, but it's not complete, that people say, well, the Jews add to the Torah and the Christians take away from the Torah. The Jews add to the law and the Hebrew and the Christians take away from the law. That's a simplified explanation because both parties do both. The Jews have added to the Torah and they have taken away from the Torah. The Christians have added to the Torah and they have taken away from the Torah. We are all of us guilty of both of these things. And this is serious, serious business. And here's just broad brush strokes here for you. Just think about this. If you remove commandments from the Torah, then you are, as a teacher, a leader, a nation, inducing people to unknowingly sin because you have removed some commandments. They are now ignorant of what is required of them. If you take away from the Torah, if you add to the Torah, then you are saddling people with invalid guilt and shame. Those are two serious things. There is a lot of invalid guilt and shame that can be brought about upon all kinds of believers because someone told them that something was a violation of God's commands. Like if you're one of these old-time Baptists or something, you're not allowed to dance or to drink any alcohol. Play cards, short skirts. Not that you want to be wearing short skirts necessarily.
Shorter than your ankles.
Shorter than your ankles. Yeah. So yes, there have been many commandments that have been added by Christians.
Christians have added a lot now that I think about it.
Yeah, they have.
Okay. We've got our own Talmud.
We do have our own Talmud. You know, it's funny when you say we have our own Talmud because we absolutely do have our own Talmud.
But it's different.
It's just called Christian commentary.
Oh.
I mean, and I've told you guys this before. I mean, you guys know if you have looked at the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Talmud, all it is rabbis commentating on what they think the Bible means.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, in more seriously Orthodox circles, that commentary has taken on the strength of law.
Well, now the same has happened for Christian commentary, especially when it comes to prophecy, because like the other day I was online. I shouldn't have been. Sorry.
That's right.
And it said, let me think of the way it said it. It said something about you will take the mark of the beast on your head or your hand, and the next sentence began, this chip, da-da-da-da-da. And it just took for granted that the mark of the beast was a chip. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a second. It was like just stated as common knowledge.
Well, I know that is correct because of these
could be,
yes,
but it's not
because commentators and prophecy buffs since the 70s have talked about some kind of an electronic chip on your hand or your forehead. As soon as mechanical ways of transferring money came about, they were like, "Oh, there it is, man."
There's a lot of assumptions
and
that
you know
aren't
what?
there.
Yeah, there are a lot of assumptions that aren't there. But people look at that and they say, "Oh, there it is," and that's a supposition. It's certainly not proven fact. Could it be true? I suppose.
Could, but you have to remember it's written in pencil, not pen.
Yes, you got to write that in pencil for sure. And I think there are other people who are thinking a vaccine for the coronavirus. There's another thing. It's like if you got to get a coronavirus vaccine.
Yeah, but that isn't accepted as like just general fact yet.
No, it's not. No, that's a new and popular idea though.
Yeah.
I don't want a coronavirus vaccine. I just don't. I'm not a big vaccine guy myself. Period. But is that like the mark of the beast? I can't imagine. I suppose it could be. Who knows? But I would say I have more in my heart and in my mind that says that your hand and your head, that mark upon your hand and your head, is basically you, your thoughts, your deeds, your belief system is what's characterizing you as either a member of the beast's system or Jehovah's system.
I think that's what Tracy's going to
Tracy, tell it, girl.
Yeah, I write about this a little bit in the name study that I have going out right now. But when you look, Satan's a counterfeiter. He wants to do everything like Yahovah, but you can't recognize what a counterfeit is unless you're trained to know the difference between what is true and what is counterfeit. Just like counterfeit, it all looks the same.
Yeah.
And so Yahovah's name, it's spiritual. It is his word in our foreheads, his name on our foreheads, and on our hands. That's what he says. Write these words on your forehead and in your frontlets of your eyes and your hand.
Yep.
And the mark of the beast is in the same place. And it even says in that same place, they've taken the number of his name. Mm-hmm. So it's his name marking them. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think there's anything any man can do to your flesh that is going to separate you from God. Mm-hmm. Because it's inside of you. Yep. If that word is inside of you, like I said, no man can break it and steal that. Yep. You're God's. No man can curse what God has blessed.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that because of a lot of these commentators and this prophecy stuff, I suppose it's possible that the governments of the world may someday decide that you can't buy or sell stuff without a chip, in your hand or something. And that's certainly possible. Are you willing to die because you are saying, I'm not going to put this chip in my hand in order to be able to buy
If you
stuff.
think that you're going to go to hell because of it, then you probably would die.
I know, but how many people actually believe that they're going to die and go to hell
think
if they
more
put...
than you would think.
And that's what he wants. It's a fear tactic.
Yes.
And Messiah says, do not fear.
Right. And I'm saying to you, do I want to get do I have no problem at all with getting implanted with an RFID chip? Of course I do. I don't want one of those stupid things in my body. But if someone says to me, you're going to die and you can't buy and sell things unless you have this thing. Like, okay, that's I'm not just going to naturally knee-jerk and say, oh my gosh, this is the mark of the beast. This is what we've been talking about since the 70s. We're all going to die, we can't buy and sell stuff. I would be like, let's think about that a little bit more. Go ahead, Kevin. I apologize.
Oh, no. I was just thinking, it's interesting. I was thinking about that today. Tracy, I was looking at that 119 Ministries. They just posted something on the Mark of the Beast. But it's pretty interesting, like all of the different technology that's out. A lot of that stuff, though, you can remove it. So I have a chip in my hand. If I really don't want that chip in my hand, I just take the thing out. If it came down to it, they're tracking me. I can't see how that could be a significant mark. And I guess from where I come from, or what my understanding of what the word was, now compared to then I didn't understand that just about every word in the word actually has more meaning than just the idea of it saying the end or the car or the bus. Like these things actually have more significant meanings, and they're layered meanings, which is pretty interesting. So, for example, the head and the hand doesn't necessarily mean, or could not necessarily mean the head and the hand. It could mean something else. So it's interesting how I think modern Christianity is interpreting everything, taking things at face value. However, not taking at face value Yeshua saying, "Obey my commandments."
Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah,
what commandments? One you take at face value, and one is just the idea of that thing. It's just pretty crazy.
That's a great observation.
Tracy, was that the second name study that talked about the head and the hand and the nature?
She don't know. She just wrote it.
Yeah, I didn't write it, actually. He was just using my fingers.
Well, I think it'd be cool if you maybe sent out an email with that one attached to it again.
Yeah, I actually, in each week, I'm sending the newest one, and I have below all the links to
Okay.
the ones that are previously. But I think parts 2 and 3 specifically are about the mark of God versus the mark of the beast.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, if you want to send a link to me, I could. I don't know if do you have everybody's email? You send them out to everybody, right? I know.
Everybody that signed up on that want to. I don't want to give them to people that don't want them.
No, understood. So if you're not signed up for Tracy's newsletter, why don't you type a message here, Tracy, with maybe a link? You just copy and paste a link in the chat box there for everybody.
Tammy had an interesting comment just now. She said, and I have no idea how to answer this. What's the link to buying and selling then?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we'll ponder that and get back to you.
Can we say something?
Please do.
Well, the mark of the beast has been around from day one because we know it. It's what Tracy just went through and explained to us. And what do we do? What do people separate themselves and do on the Shabbat, right?
Yeah.
We separate ourselves from the world and we don't buy and sell. So it's sort of the same kind of what Tracy just went through and said the beast kind of is going to set up something to look like what Jehovah has done for us. So that's where that tie comes in.
That's an interesting...
Go ahead, Wayne. Go ahead.
Also, Alan, just piggybacking off what you said when you were talking about the people that do believe that we're going to get and it might be that there'll be a time when you have to get a physical mark to be able to buy and sell. And you said, like, wow, you mean I really have to get that to buy and sell? It goes back to the beginning. It's the same trickery Satan deception that he played on Eve when he said, did God tell you that you're going to die if you eat of this fruit? It's like he's trying to put a spin on words and go against God's commandment and will and the common sense of what we know of what his word has taught us. He's trying to like flip the whole scenario, and it goes back to like what Marie just said, that the mark of the beast has been here since the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's unfortunate that oftentimes, and we can see from the interpreted prophecies of the first arrival of the Messiah Yeshua, that we often take literal what should be taken spiritual, and we take spiritual what should be interpreted literally. We seem to have this. We don't have a very good track record of interpreting things the way we should. So just consider that.
Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy, for sending that over. Tracy sent over a message for everybody who wants to get down on her newsletter thing. So that, yeah, it's good stuff. Now, I wanted to point out here briefly. I'm going back to my slide here for a second. It says, "Held fast." You, in verse 4, chapter 4, verse 4, "But you who held fast to Yehovah your God are alive today, every one of you." Now, this Hebrew word "held fast" is H1695, which is dabek. That is to cling to follow close behind. And this is contrasted. How are they alive? Well, contrast that with why the others are not alive. They attached themselves. They followed closely behind Baal Peor. What do you...
Is that the attached, the wife, the cleaving, the leave your...
It is. Yes, it is.
That makes sense.
Does it not make sense?
That's marriage that speak.
It is marriage speak. Yes, it is.
Got it.
So the people who attached themselves to Baal Peor, he destroyed every one of them. The leaders, because a lot of the people who probably got involved in that, they were perhaps spared, but we know that 24,000 people died in the incident of Baal Peor. I don't know if it was everyone who had anything to do with it.
Attachment looked
Yeah,
like.
we don't know exactly what attachment looked like in that case.
There was a line that they crossed.
Some people crossed that line and they died. But those who held fast to Yehovah, their God, were alive today, every one of them. And so this is contrasted with those who did not. Now, I'm suggesting to you then that you should hold fast to Yehovah. And what I would say about this is, and I want to paint a picture of a dichotomy here, something that is going two different ways. If you are holding fast to anything in this world, anything in your life that could take the place of God, because I think this is another one of those stupid, unfortunate, interpretive ideas that we have in Christianity, that when the Bible speaks about idolatry, it's talking about stone and wooden statues. Yeah. And these gods in the world where people were literally worshiping these little statues. Worshiping fertility goddesses and such. But unfortunately, we so very much discount the strong biblical proponent who says, man, this is anything that you place your hope, faith, and trust in. That can be your God.
Or that you fear more than
fear more than God. It could be your children. It could be your job. It could be your vacation. It could be your 401k. It could be anything. Excuse me?
Nothing.
You were whispering something.
I decided not to.
It could be anything that you are holding fast to, dabek, instead of God. The reason that I wanted to bring this to your attention is, especially in the times that we're living in now with all of the chaos out there, that we might have a tendency to look around us and say, oh my gosh, my health, oh my gosh, my money, oh my gosh, my 401k, oh my gosh, my business, whatever. My future plans, whatever it is.
Toilet paper stash.
My toilet paper stash, yes. There are so many things that you can look around out there and say, oh, I need to cling to that. Do not cling to those things. Yes, we have needs, and I want to just continuously, I will remind you until the day that I am not able to remind you anymore. God, Yeshua, and God, both of them say, why do you worry about these things? And I tell you this because I struggle with this myself just like you do. When we're saying peace and safety, we really want peace and safety. We really want our money to be okay, and we really want our health to be okay. Man, we can seriously elevate those things to holding fast to those things.
And then what do we end up doing in order to
we
try
lose
and maintain them? Yeah,
we lose them in our efforts to maintain
That's
them.
what's
I know, Tracy?
Tracy.
I just want to kind of point out the parallel to Jacob wrestling with the man who he reveals to be God.
Yep.
And he held fast and he would not let go until he blessed him. And it says here in verse 4, you are alive today because of this. And that's what Jacob said is that he wrestled with God and with men, and his life was preserved. And I have seen the face of God, and my life is preserved. And that word preserved, I think, is something like redeemed. It's not like snatched or up or something like that. Like he's been delivered and saved because he held fast to this one and didn't let go until he was blessed. And then we see in Revelation the same kind of verbiage used. I think it's 3:10 and 11. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of trial which will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast to what you have, that no one may take your crown. And the woman that grabbed Messiah's tzitzit and was healed. This is the idea of holding the commands and holding the word and not letting go until he blesses.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think holding fast, and I love those passages that you talked about there, Tracy, about, somebody's going to get rescued. And Yeshua is saying to people, pray that you be found worthy to escape what is coming upon the earth. What is going to make you worthy? What's your guess? I'll give you 3 guesses. What is your guess about what's going to make you to be found worthy at the return? Tracy?
I always tell this to my daughter. I'm like, we're supposed to keep the commands, and we're supposed to hold fast to his word. But if you are ever standing in front of the Almighty and he says, what did you do to deserve to get in here?
Nothing.
I did nothing.
Yeah.
He did. Don't ever
Yes.
try to take credit for doing anything.
Yes.
Because all that you can do is because of what he did.
Yep.
And what he's done through you.
Right. I would strongly endorse what Tracy just said. Many of you may be thinking as I was launching into this thing, like, what can you do to be found worthy at his coming? Many of you might have thought I was going to say, observe the Torah. No, I am not going to say observe the Torah. Not that that's not a fantastic idea. It certainly is. But let me just finish my thought. Okay. I apologize. I would say, number one, you need to be trusting God and not trusting in anything else. And therefore, you are trusting in God and the work that he did for you. God is your Savior. You are not going to save yourself. So if you believe in God, trust in God. Remember that the Hebrew term and the Greek term do not mean mental assent. I do not just believe what I heard and think, that's fantastic. That is not what it means. It means I am faithful to that word. I believe and I act on it. It's just like Shema. I heard it and I act on it. Faithfulness. Always when the text says believe, all of you who believed, that means all of you who heard and are faithful. So how can you be found worthy to escape? I don't know. Some of you may be marked for death, that you are going to die because he has a plan for you. He wants you to give testimony in that way. I don't know
We're
on
all
what.
Gonna die.
No, of course, but
Okay.
You know what I'm saying.
Well, I'm just saying that,
I'm
that's a much better way to go than just...
Oh, of course it is. But what I'm saying is, I think we all need to be of the mind that says, God saved my life through the tribulation period no matter what. That may not be what you want exactly. I don't know. But what I would say is, Yeshua told us to pray that we would be considered worthy. What can we do to be considered worthy? We can be faithful as he is faithful, and we can be obedient as he was obedient. 2 things.
Can I say
Faith
one
and
more?
works. That's it. Go for it.
I've said this before, and it's someone else's saying, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but it applies to what we were just talking about. You are not saved by what you believe. You are not saved by what you say. And you are not saved by what you do. You're saved because of what he did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Angela, we're damned by all those things. Everything that we do is just a marker of this guy needs to get whacked. This guy is not living according to the way that the God of heaven and earth has said this is the way to live on heaven and earth.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Observing the Torah so poorly,
Yeah.
I would whack myself. I would plan. But he is so gracious.
Yeah.
And yet, when we are trying, I feel, it's like I'm on training wheels and I'm going down the driveway 3 miles an hour, all rickety. And he's like, you're doing it. And I'm 54 years old and I'm just now starting to try to
I'm
get
trying to
with the
picture
program,
Jimmy on a tricycle.
and blessing me. And I could laugh about it, but I could cry about it at the same time. It's just crazy. He's so kind, and he puts up with our junk for decades.
Yeah.
And he's so kind.
Yeah,
That's myself.
That's
when I realized that he's so powerful, and powerful people are jerks, and yet he's still good to us like a sweetheart. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jimbo. And, we are not believing enough or speaking correctly or doing correctly enough to be considered worthy. Tracy?
And that being said, I know I've said this before, but that this is where the grace gets perverted, because you also need to understand that, yes, you are required to do things, to do what he says. Just as a fruit tree, its function and purpose is to produce fruit, and that's what he compares us to. But it doesn't produce fruit in order to save itself.
Yeah.
It produces fruit because it lives.
Right.
So it doesn't produce fruit in order to live, it produces fruit because it lives. So that is its function. And if it's not fulfilling its function, then we also need to look at what he says to trees that don't produce fruit.
Yep, absolutely. Good observation. Hot topic. Good stuff. I love hearing you guys chat about these things, and I know you got some good wisdom attached to you there. Praise Yehovah for that. I want to also bring to your attention this next section in chapter 4, verse 6, where it says that these righteous statutes and judgments that we receive from Yehovah, they are our wisdom and our understanding in the sight of the peoples. That is such a powerful statement, because it really shows that these commands and these instructions from Yehovah they are wisdom. They absolutely are wisdom, and they are righteousness. And it reminds me, because this whole little section here, what great nation is there that has statutes like this, And so that talks to me about evangelism. I mean, this section is really about evangelism. I don't know if you realize that, but this section of this chapter is really an evangelistic chapter. It's talking about how, when you hear and obey these righteous instructions that I'm giving you, man, the people around you are going to look at who you are and how you speak and how you behave, and they're going to say, wow, something different is going on here. And I don't know if you have probably seen some memes or something on the internet about this, but, we here in America take Judeo-Christian values so much for granted. I don't know if you're aware of this, and I hope you are. I know that I have spoken about it at least once in another teaching a couple of months back, that there are lots of people on this planet in different nations who do not have Judeo-Christian values. They lie and cheat and steal and engage in cronyism and have all kinds of wicked behaviors just as a cultural That's just the way they do things. It's quite normal for them. And it's maddening, for example, when international businesses try to do business with some of these people in these other cultures, because here in America, even if you're not a Christian, you have a certain preconceived idea that just everybody is going to understand the difference between right and wrong. You're not supposed to lie and cheat and steal, and if you say you're going to do something, you should do it. And, those principles are Judeo-Christian values that were inherited by our forefathers because of these wise and understanding words that we have inherited. But not everybody has that. That is not as commonplace as you might think it is. Remember this. We people of the world who understand and know these wise and understanding words of the Bible are a small minority of the world's population. Think about the people in India, in China, those two nations have the bulk of the world's population. They don't understand these principles. I don't know if you've done much research on cultural aspects of the Chinese society, or the people from India, or the people from Africa. They don't understand these things at all. They do not behave in these ways. Many of them. Some do. Christianity has made inroads into these places, but not to the degree like you and I are familiar with, where just the whole society is just infiltrated, at least with the idea. I know it's slipping. I know that it's slipping and it's not what it once was, but it still seems at least that there is at least a vestige, a vestigial trace of people who understand the difference between right and wrong. But this is our wisdom that is inherited from these texts to inform our society that we live in. And that's such a tremendous blessing. But notice that God put the Israelites right at a major crossroads of the known world of the ancient Middle East. I mean, they're at the major cultural crossroads of all of these ancient civilizations, the Greeks, the Romans, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians. If they want to interact with each other at all, they have to go through Israel. So Israel is sticking out like a sore thumb. Now, unfortunately, they never did a great job. But here's one thing that I would point out to you. We're living it today in America, in certain other parts of the world, where these ideas that were inherited from our forefathers still have a strong flavor in our culture. And that's an amazing blessing that we sometimes very much take for granted, because we just assume that that's the norm. It's absolutely not. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, about that. I was just thinking about the bees.
The bees.
The bees. Because, bee is Devar.
Buzz?
Yeah, buzz.
Buzz bee. Okay.
That Israel is almost like the center of the flower. Mm-hmm. And the bees travel in and take it and go out.
Yep.
But then another way to get that done is to have a wind scatter that stuff all over, and that's how it fills the whole earth. And I think we've moved from the bee stage to the scattering stage, where the wind has scattered all the stuff, and now we're supposed to fill the whole earth with that. Right?
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good insight. I'm moving forward a little bit. I want to say, in regards to I've moved to chapter 4, verse 9, where it says, you should guard yourself so that these words that he's giving us do not depart from us all the days of our life, but we should make them known to our sons and daughters. Now, I know that, many of you either, your children are grown and gone, or you don't have children. But man, this is such a powerful thing, that making these things known to our children is one of the most important tasks in our lives. We have to teach them in word and in deed. And I think one of the worst things that I saw growing up, and that it really incites rebellion and contempt and bringing shame upon yourself and upon the name of God when you speak the words of God but you do not live them. Nothing has brought contempt to the name of God more than parents, teachers, Christians from all over who speak the words of God but do not live the words of God. That is really tough. And I think, to the degree, if you're raising children or if you have influence on grandchildren even, being fully dedicated to speaking the words of God and demonstrating in your character the words of God is so critical. I mean, you hear so many times just in the book of Deuteronomy where we're talking about influence on children. That these ideas are not going to just happen by osmosis. We have a strong responsibility to share them. So, sorry, jumping down off of the soapbox. Watch yourselves carefully because you did not see any form. Now, I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm going to ask you because I don't have the answer to this question. And that is, and I know Angela and I discussed this the other day, and you probably have some good ideas, so I'll ask you, why does God put so much emphasis on not attaching any symbol or image or form to himself? Because he talks about this a lot. This is very, very important to him. And he says here in this section, be really careful. Watch yourselves, since you did not see any form. Do not make any form or graven image. He carries on about this for a little while. It's like, why is he so hardcore about you not attaching some type of a visual representation to him? Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I'm loath to say that I have an experience about that. When I was in a coma with my own plague 6 years ago, I was in a coma for 32 days. I remember being with the dead. And I say that knowing that some of you are thinking that Jim's nuts, he's cuckoo. But I have no reason to lie. And when Messiah brought me out of the grave, brought me back, I didn't see anything. I just knew he was there. I knew it better than I've known anything in my life. I couldn't touch it or describe anything. I just knew that the King of the universe was having mercy on me and pulling me out of the grave.
Well, let me ask you this, Jimbo. Why do you think that God places so much emphasis on not attaching anything like that to him?
Because we are so happy to create a counterfeit and to follow after something less than he is, and be satisfied with that. Something we can touch or look at or say, that's my God, Anytime you go into a Vietnamese restaurant or Chinese restaurant, there's a cat waving at you. I don't know what that's about, but it's cuckoo. And they're satisfied that that's enough for them to, have some connection with eternity.
Yeah.
And timelessness. And it's not, that's what we evolve into is, I guess it's got a AA battery in the back of it somewhere to keep its hand waiting. I don't know. But our God doesn't need a battery to keep going.
That's very interesting, Jimbo, and I would say that's good insight. But Mikey, I apologize. Go ahead, buddy.
I was just going to say, maybe in verse 25 we kind of get a clue, because it's talking about the descendants of the people that are in the land and their children. We know that we should be passing on the Torah to our children in order for them to know and continue in God's commands. So when you attach an image image that this represents who he is, it would be very easy for our children and their children down the line to associate this to something not true.
Yeah.
You kind of see this in the verses here where it's talking about, animals and the sun and the moon and the stars, and I just think it would get corrupted even easier.
Yep.
You start to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight. Tracy? Do you want to let Bubby out?
And we saw how, when Moses lifted up the serpent on the pole, that somehow got held onto and people were worshiping it.
Yep.
And that was an abomination.
Yep.
And Messiah likens himself to, this, as Moses lifted up the pole and the serpent and whatnot. So in my mind, I'm thinking of the crucifix and how people today venerate this image of Messiah on the cross in the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't pleasing to God then. It's foolishness to think that it's pleasing to him now.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Angela, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Tammy posted a comment. She said, he's beyond form, he's not material, which I think sums up what you guys were saying. I was thinking when we were having our discussion earlier this week about this, that if you make him in the image of a man, there's this tendency for over time, like Mike said, with your children and your grandchildren, there's this human tendency, if he's in the image of a man, to start thinking that he is your equal, because you are also a man. And if you make him in the image of anything else, well, we were made to rule over the nature, and so there's the tendency there to start thinking that God is below us. And so and that has happened with humanism, and as we've neglected to teach our children. There's been this human tendency to move towards limiting God, and he is not limited. He is beyond form. He's not material.
Yep. And I think, another thing that I thought of is just a little while back, it was just last week, as a matter of fact, we were talking about Moses relaying some information about what had led up to this current situation we find ourselves in, that they found themselves in, where he was talking about judges. And he's saying, you shall not recognize faces, talking about, judging righteously. And I don't know for what reason, but I connected that with this, with God not wanting a form to be attached to him. I think he almost seems to say to me, pay attention to what I say and pay attention to what I do. Don't pay attention to what I look like. And that's the same thing that he said to Moses regarding appointment of judges. Pay attention to what they do and pay attention to what they say, but don't recognize their faces, because we get our vision is super confused. And I think it goes right back to the garden where we lost our spiritual senses. We are spiritually as blind as bats, and we don't have the ability to discern between the spiritual and the physical very well. And so...
And Angela, one image would never do.
Yeah, that's true, Jamie.
He's too multifaceted.
Yeah, that's true.
Even the seraphim that surround him, that kind of reflect aspects of who he is. One side looks like a man, one side looks like a bull, one side looks like a lion, one side looks like an eagle. It's just not possible to encapsulate it. You leave something crucial out, and you have half a God.
Yeah, that's right. Good insight, Jimbo. Kevin, go ahead.
Well, I also think that you can also look at, for example, there's no way for me to identify or to draw a picture of what my heart looks like, what I look like internally.
Sure.
I can only have actions and things that I do that I exhibit kind of what those things are. But he's really looking to be inside of us as opposed to just find himself as this image or picture, right?
Yeah.
It's where we are. It's the heart of everything. Even, for example, the Torah being written on our hearts as opposed to being just the idea of it being written down for us, even though it is written down. But I'm saying it's kind of like an image really does almost minimize the actual true meaning of it.
Yeah, no, that's a good insight. I absolutely agree. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin. I was going to say, Okay. Sorry, let me just check my notes. I apologize. I want to see how far along I am. I know I'm it's 8:17. I want to make sure yeah, you know what I'm going to do, folks? I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. I'm going to skip over to... Oh, gosh, I don't want to skip that. I'm going to read this to you at least, and I'm going to throw something out there. This is chapter 4, verse 26. This is just so important. It says, I want to call heaven and earth to witness against you today that you will surely perish quickly from the land where you are going over the Jordan to possess it. You shall not live long in it, but you will be utterly destroyed. Yahweh will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where Yahweh drives you. There you will serve other gods, the work of man's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor smell nor eat. But from there you will seek Yahweh your God, and you will find him if you search for him with all your heart and with all your soul. And when you are in distress, and all these things have come upon you in the latter days, when you will return to Yahweh your God and listen to his voice. For Yahweh your God is compassionate God. He will not fail you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers, which he swore to them. These are the prophetic utterances of Moshe in returning, in regards to the children of Israel. That is a whole overview of their whole history. And ours too is included in that. And I would say that this is the prophecy of the exile and the return. It is continuing to happen in cycles, just like we've talked about on so many different occasions. The Hebrew people at this time are scattered, and they are few in number relative to the other peoples of the world. They are a small, small people. Now, that doesn't include necessarily the sons of Joseph, but it's something to think about. But in the end times, they will return. When it says when the distress comes upon them, and I want to just bring your attention to that. You will seek Yahweh, in verse 30, when you are in distress, and all these things that I promised you have come upon you, then you will turn. You will return to Yahweh your God. You will shuv. You will return. Absolutely. And so I want to bring to your attention Romans chapter 11, verse 15. Think about that for a moment. If their rejection is your restoration, what will their acceptance be except life from the dead? And I would purport to say to you that time is near. That what will their acceptance be? Paul was looking forward in the future and saying, yes, it seems that God has set aside his people for a time in order to open up the fullness of the Gentiles. But what's it going to look like when their acceptance comes? When they are grafted back in, so to speak, when the doors are opened and they are brought back into the fellowship? Resurrection from the dead. And that is the time that is upon us. I think that, these distressing things that we see around us, it's nothing more so than the Jews dealing with the same things. And I think that they're...
Not even that bad. I mean...
No, I know. What they've had to deal with? No, okay. This is nothing. But what I'm saying is, if these types of things are bringing us to our knees in these Western cultures, it's certainly beginning to happen in Israel. And yes, more things are going to shake loose. But when that happens, these prophetic words of Moses are going to be fulfilled, and you're going to see a resurrection from the dead, both of the nation of Israel and of all of the believers in the Messiah Yeshua, because I believe and I think that there's good evidence from Scripture prophetically to discuss how those two things are happening simultaneously, or at least really close together in time. So the reference in Romans, Gracie, is 11:15. Romans 11:15. I apologize. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I'm going to move forward a little bit. I skipped chapter 5. Chapter 5 is an overview of the Ten Commandments. It's very short. There is one key difference just as an FYI, and I would encourage you to look this up and do a little bit of research on it, that when the Ten Commandments are delineated in Exodus chapter 20, and then they're delineated here again in Deuteronomy chapter 5, there is a slight difference.
Well,
So
I think, isn't there a few little differences, but one more significant one?
think about that. Yes, take a look at it in your studies, perhaps. But here I'm dealing with the Shema, the actual Shema. And I just want to bring a couple of things to your attention. It says here, and I'm going to read this to you because this is such a critical portion. Starting in chapter 6, verse 4, it says, Hear, O Israel, Yehovah is our God, Yehovah is one. You shall love Yehovah your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all of your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be upon your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Then it shall come about when Yehovah your God brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you great and splendid cities which you did not build, and houses full of good things which you did not fill, and cisterns hewn which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you eat and are satisfied. Then watch yourself, that you do not forget Yehovah, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall fear only Yehovah your God, and you shall worship only him, and swear by his name. You shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the peoples who surround you. For Yehovah your God in the midst of you is a jealous God. Otherwise the anger of Yehovah your God will be kindled against you, and he will wipe you off the face of the earth.
Is that an option?
What?
Is that really an option?
Is what an option?
Wipe you off the face of the earth?
Well, I would say yes. I would say yes. So, the Shema, this is the most important commandment of the Bible, according to Yeshua, and it encapsulates all of the commandments of the Bible in one statement. And I want to bring your attention to just a couple of things, okay? Here is the actual Hebrew transliteration of this passage. A couple of interesting things that I want to bring to your attention. Now, when it says Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, what does the word Echad mean to you? I mean, when you're looking at this, and we have all heard the Shema, what is that telling us? That God is the only God? Cal, what do you got to say, buddy?
Keith? This is Keith here.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. Cal, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, it has to do with unity. That it's more Echad. He is one, but he's also it's unity.
Now, okay. So unity with what? Unified in what way? What is unified?
No conflict within him.
What is unified?
Yeah, I mean, several of you have put into the text and you're nodding your head saying unity. I get that, but I want you to delineate that for me a little bit. What do you mean unified in what way? What is he unified with?
Well, with the Spirit, and then with Yeshua. The unity of how he presents himself, how we perceive him. He's all knowing. He's all encompassing.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Wayne.
Just like it said in the beginning, let us make man in his image. So we know that Yeshua was there from the beginning. Basically, the unity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and unified in one purpose.
Okay. So I've heard. So that's Keith and you have both basically alluded to some Trinitarian ideas that God is three but one, and there's a unity in this threeness, I suppose you would say. Tracy, you want to weigh in on that?
So as a house is made up of many stones, one house. That's what this unity is. So either we are with him. Messiah says, he who doesn't gather with me scatters. So either we are with him or we are against him. And I think just as Paul talks about the body, like he is the head. We are different parts of the body, but we are one body.
And let me ask you this, Tracy. I know that, as believers in God, all of us around the world, we have very different cultural experiences. We have different personalities. We have different hairstyles. We have different ways of dressing. We have different ways of doing all kinds of things. What is it that unifies us with each other?
Spiritually speaking, it is the Spirit of God that unifies us. Like, if I just have to speak with someone for a short amount of time to know that I recognize them. And a lot of times it has to do with how they're speaking, not necessarily what they're saying, although that's important. But I've said before, like, if someone comes speaking scripture to me in like a nasty way, I don't recognize them. But if someone comes to me humbly and loving, even if they're correcting me, I can recognize that spirit. And I just know that is, Messiah says, this is how you will know that you are of me. I'm saying it wrong, but that by your love for one another. And it's not love according to what man calls love, but according to what God calls love. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, great insights, you guys. I think that you have a good, solid understanding. I'm not checking your knowledge. I'm just, there's a lot of different ideas out there. I mean, to a Jew who reads the Shema, to them, when they read the word Shema, when they read the word Echad, they're saying God is the only God. To them, it's unity in singularity. Because to a Jew, they don't necessarily recognize the Spirit of God as God Himself. They don't have ideas like of the Trinity like we do, but they see Echad as being God is the only God. That's one prominent feature of the way that they present that idea. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that. I'm just saying it's a fact. Angela?
We may have, with the Trinity, we may have opened up to different aspects of God, to three. Wow, three? Just three? I think there's all sorts of aspects of God that we probably could not even begin to understand. It'd be like a circle trying to understand a sphere.
Sure.
I think that the oneness is that there's no conflict. However many aspects of God there are, that there's no conflict or contradiction among those. That He's completely at peace.
Yeah.
With all of His pieces and parts. And we have a really hard time as people in a 3D world trying to comprehend that.
Absolutely. And there's nothing we can really do about that. This is one of the mysteries of God, which, it's oftentimes it's not really even worth discussing because it's so outside of our.
Hasn't He given us enough?
He has, but
we gotta try to jump ahead.
We're humans like that, and we love tripping over ourselves and things that really should just be left alone. It's like, yes, I have multiple parts that are super powerful and they coexist, and
they're in agreement.
They're in agreement. You're not going to get it. Don't really try. Just know that they're there. And I'm like, that's probably the best way to look at it, Jimbo.
Hey, Alan. God doesn't describe Himself as Yakid, which is isolated singularity, like a monolithic structure that stands alone. He describes Himself as a God of multiplicity that's united and working together like fingers in a hand.
Right.
And when you talk to Jews about that, say, how in the world is this God you're talking about, how does He operate like fingers of a hand?
Yeah.
And just let them answer. Let them go, blah, 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 and fall all over themselves. And say there's got to be an answer, doesn't there? Otherwise, the word is incorrect. You should have used the word Yakid.
Sure.
And make them stand there and defend themselves. And then when they get upset, they say, there's a Spirit of God, and that God comes as the Father. When you read certain passages, you know that Messiah is the Son. What keeps these three aspects from being who God is?
Yeah. That's good insight, Jimbo. Appreciate that. That's good. It's difficult stuff.
One more thing. The Spirit is not a member of the family. He's not a son. He's a servant, like Abraham's servant. It's crazy. I mean, you can't begin to understand it, that a servant who's not a part of the family is still an aspect of who God is. It's just, you get to Genesis 24 and you see who that servant is and what he does. He brings a Gentile bride from the son to the son.
Yeah, I think, talking about the Spirit and his role in things is a really difficult task to do. And I know that Yeshua, when trying to explain these things to Nicodemus, he didn't go into much detail. He's like, it's like the wind, You don't know where it's going, you don't know what it is. And he's like, what are you talking about? It was a funny episode. But you can see that on the on your screen. Oh, sorry. Did somebody else want to pipe in there?
I just wanted to ask you a question, Alan. So, what do they believe in Genesis, the us's, or let us make man in our image?
A Jew, in my understanding, believes that what that is called is plenipotentiary power. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's called plenipotentiary power, meaning when God says us, that's just saying I'm so awesome that I refer to myself in multiple facets. It sounds interesting, but it's not quite as powerful as what I think.
The royal we.
The royal we, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it's not as quite as satisfying, but there it is. So notice these three little boxes that I put on this second part of the Shema, because I think there's a little bit of instruction here that I want to bring out for you. And you can see here that it says, you shall love Yehovah your God with all your heart, levaveka, with all your soul, nafsheka, with all your strength, meodeka, excuse me. So there are these three things pointed out to us here. You shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And I think that what I would like to point out to you here is levaveka. Now, you've probably known that the Hebrew word for heart is lavav. Lavav is attached with eka, which means your. So it's just lavav and then eka, levaveka, your heart. Now, heart in the Hebrew is better translated as mind, just because culturally for a long time the ancient concept is that thoughts and feelings and emotional responses originated in the heart, not the mind. And so when the Bible says heart in almost every instance, you should really translate that as mind. Because but it's interesting, a couple of interesting things about that. Number one, I can understand why ancient peoples thought about things that way, because I know and you know that when you are experiencing the effects of thought and emotion and feelings, it can sometimes weigh upon your heart. It feels like it might actually originate in your heart region because it quickens your breathing. Yeah, and that's another Hebrew idea, is that you can often find some ideas that are akin to the kidneys and certain parts of the lower intestine, which were thought to be seats of feeling and influence, which makes total sense to me. And I know it does to you guys as well. When you look at how thoughts and feelings and emotions impact you physically, it seems to happen somewhere between your chest and your guts. And so, what? Oh, or your shoulders. So when it says your heart, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, to them that would have been their understanding. But I think it's better for us to say your mind, to love the Lord your God with all your mind. And you can go back to the Shema where it says you will think about him, you will talk about him, you'll write his words upon your doorposts and upon your gates, and you can hang them like pictures in front of your eyes. So that's where that is leading us, that first step, which is pretty all-encompassing already, which is you filling your mind. And this reminds me of that passage from Philippians where Paul says, if there's anything lovely and gracious and pure, think on these things, and the peace that surpasses, these are those same passages. That filling your mind with him is how you love the Lord your God. This is how you demonstrate that. This is part of how you demonstrate it.
But there's more.
But there's more, because then it says, nafsheka, your soul, nafesh. The nefesh. Love the Lord your God with all your soul. Now, this takes it to a bit of a deeper level. This is not just your mind, your will, and emotions. This is going even deeper than that. Because you know that God took that neshama and breathed it into a man, and the man became a living being, which is what nefesh is. So this is saying you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, meaning your mind, will, and emotions. You will love the Lord your God even deeper, taking it to a spiritual level. It's going to pervade your whole being, even the invisible parts of yourself. And then finally you get to this weird one, meodeka, which does not really mean strength. If you look up meod in your Hebrew lexicon, you'll see that it simply means very. It's an adverb. It's not an adjective at all. It literally means very or much, exceedingly. So what does this mean? I think this is building us up to a climax. It's saying, I want you have to love the Lord your God with all of your mind, will, and emotions. It will begin to infuse your whole spiritual being, and then amplify that. Very, very much. That's difficult. That's difficult for me to fathom. Now, I don't know about you, but I look at a situation like this with this text, and I say to myself, man, how am I doing? Am I loving the Lord my God to that depth? What does that even mean? How do I do that? Your thoughts? That's okay. I don't know what to say about it either. I know that it's very profound, and I know that I think to myself, how can I love my God to that degree? He doesn't need anything from me. It's not like I can give him something that's going to make him appreciate me. How do I demonstrate that love? Is it a feeling? Am I just supposed to feel love for God?
Love is a verb.
Love is, okay, Angela says love is a verb, but we all know that. So
No.
Well, I mean, that's a common meme or a trope that people say all the time.
Yeah, but still they think it's a feeling.
Well, I know. I think that kids, teenagers, and young 20-somethings think that love is a feeling.
It's Disney's fault.
The Disneyfication. Tracy, are you...
Love my commandments.
What'd you say?
If you love me, keep my commandments.
Thank you.
That's doing.
Yes, that is a verb. That is doing. And I think that this takes me back to the words of Yeshua where he said, if you give even a cup of water to one of these little ones, I will consider that you did it to me. Because he has no need of our gifts. It says he's got 1,000 cattle on 1,000 hills. He doesn't need your sacrifices. I think that what it means, and that's just like what Tracy was talking about a moment ago, where she said, if you love each other, everyone will know that you're my disciples. That is how we love the Lord our God, is by loving what He made and what He did. And that means loving each other. I think that is probably the best way I can describe how you are to love the Lord your God, is by loving Him, by loving what He created, and loving the things that He loves.
Well, we talked about it earlier this week about He wants us to participate. Mm-hmm. He set this whole thing up so that we could participate with Him. Not that He ever needed us to, but...
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's pretty cool.
It is very cool.
I think He wants our participation.
He definitely wants participators. Absolutely. Tracy?
It really struck me when I understood what Messiah was saying about unless the grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. Mm-hmm. That He doesn't want to be alone. Mm-hmm. Why He came and died so that we could live with Him. That's what He wants. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the very first letter of the Torah is a house. He wants a family. He wants to build a house.
Yeah.
For people He trusts and loves, and that love Him.
A few weeks ago, I was thinking about that He doesn't want to be alone, and this whole thing about like when there's a whole burnt offering or when meat is placed on the altar, that's the way He eats with us. That's how He consumes His meal. And so, here He is trying to fellowship and have a feast with His people. Only we eat it with our teeth, and He eats it with His shin, His fire, which looks like teeth. Mm. So that's Him at His table next to us, hopefully, eating with us. And I know a lot of people, the animal cruelty. Well, the meat you're in front of you died as well, so this is just God eating His meat. And some people look at that and say, well, just putting the whole thing on there and burning it, what a waste. That is His meal.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's we're going to listen to Wayne Williamson now.
Real quick. We were created with one main purpose, and that is to worship the Lord God of the universe. And with all our strength, soul, and might, that is worship. To love the Lord with our utmost inner being is the ultimate form of worship. And that is what He wants more than anything from us. And that compasses everything like following Torah, loving your neighbors as yourself. The whole law is all a form of worship that He desires from us.
Yeah.
And, if you look carefully in Scripture too, it will tell you that we were created also. You'll see some strange verses that will say the principalities and the watchers are watching us because, they saw His glory and some of them fell. But it's something that is happening right now where we never see God's glory, but we are worshiping Him kind of blindly, and they're watching. We were created for them to see this, because you'll see it, and Paul refers to it a lot of times where they look into it and they're kind of intrigued seeing us doing what we're doing. So I think when they fell and they saw His glory, but they fell, they sinned and they fell. And God, I do believe the Scripture shows that He created us to show them, okay, you guys saw my glory, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with these people. You're not going to see my glory, and look at them. So that's just my belief, and I do see where I see that in Scripture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you.
Next to
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good enough, ladies and gentlemen. You have been most patient and kind, hanging in there for all that time. Always delightful to chat with you. I really am delighted to hear your wisdom and your insights as we share with each other. It's a real blessing.